Well, we talked recently with Tim Wise about the concept. Today, what's the impact of colorblindness? The notion that ours is a post-racial society isn't just showing up in the world of theory, it's playing out in the field this election and in President Obama's White House and in its policies. As our next guest says, post-racialism's becoming what post-racialism is doing, namely shrinking the real estate even for talking, let alone correcting racial imbalance in the U.S. as we head into the 21st century. Want to know what all that means for you, for me, for us? Well, the co-founder of the African American Policy Forum, professor of law at Columbia, Kimberle Crenshaw, will join me next.
My mother was a disciplinarian. She taught me that love comes at the end of a switch. And she was so in love with me, she used it consistently. She was teaching me something that America needs to know today in desperate ways, that discipline is a major key to the breakthrough.
That discipline, according to Scott, starts with reducing the deficit and limiting the role of government.
Well, Kim, so glad to have you with me here to try to sort some of this stuff out. So here's a guy, he's in the Myrtle Beach area of South Carolina, speaking there to an entirely white older crowd, at least that's who's showing up, and talking about how this society, needs more discipline. This is what we need?
Well, according to the Tea Party and according to this particular candidate, this is what we need. But what's interesting is there's nothing new about this particular message. You know, a lot of Tea Party candidates and basically the movement, they're saying they're really excited because this is a period where African Americans might be represented in Congress, in the Republican Party, at higher numbers since Reconstruction.
It would be historic for South Carolina.
Historic. What's interesting is there's no history as part of the story. So part of the story about what happened to black representatives in Congress from the South is they were actually pushed, lynched, and other ways terrorized out of Congress, all under the argument of discipline. They can't be elected officials. They can't run the government. They can't show any responsibility. So these lines, these sort of arguments, when they get connected up to race, tell a long-term historical story about how blackness has been regarded as undisciplined, out of control, and now we have basically African Americans, this is progress, they're saying the same thing.
We've heard a lot over the last few days about the GOP pledge to America. The language that comes out of that pledge is all about liberty, liberty. When you hear liberty, liberty, what bells go off?
Well, I think about Faubus standing in the schoolhouse door. I think about owners of restaurants during the attempt to integrate them, using an axe to say, A, I don't want any African Americans in my establishment, and B, it is my right protected by the Constitution as a property owner and as an individual to express my liberty to discriminate as much as I want to. So liberty, freedom, all of these ideas have had a very torrid sort of history with respect to race and equality in American society.
So let's move on. Another interesting story in the news recently is the story that certain black mayors are doing less well, and the language or the discussion of race is cropping up there. Adrian Fenty, for example, D.C., a recent Washington Post story suggested that he's failing and being judged to have failed precisely because he's been too colorblind.
Yeah, so this is the contradiction of post-racialism. So there are a couple rules. One is no more protest. You can't talk about racially discriminatory conditions, but you can talk about racially defective people. And part of the colorblind sort of post-racial administrative attitude is we're going to go into these cities and we're going to crack some heads, we're going to install discipline, and we're going to make these institutions work. Okay, that works primarily if your electorate is all white or predominantly white. But African Americans are starting to pick up that these are code words. They see the connection to the past and they understand that these aren't about problem solving and creating more equity. They're about asserting blame and trying to find other ways of experimenting in a context where there aren't really many resources.
And there's also the complaint, in Fenty's case, that he's been sort of dismissive of the particular needs of Black American kids. How do you address those particular needs without some particular kind of policies?
Well, this is the overall problem with all of the efforts to create some kind of post-racial intervention. You cannot solve racial problems with colorblind means. That's just a basic reality that people seem to have forgotten. Even Black mayors, even the new post-racial elected official actually doesn't seem to recognize some of the lessons from our own history. So it's not at all surprising that in these environments, they're not faring very well because they're not delivering racial equity. They might be showing some numbers, but the parents in the home know what's going on in the schools. The teachers, many veteran teachers who've been fired, they understand what the real politics in these institutions might be, and consequently this carryover politic isn't as effective with African American voters.
And yet at the same time, and we talked about this a little bit with Tim Wise, if you didn't see that episode, go check it out at our archive. There is this hullabaloo every time anybody does try to raise restorative justice kinds of issues or take a restorative justice kind of approach. That's a little bit of what happened at the Agriculture Department with Shirley Sherrod, somebody who strongly supported restorative measures, basically a kind of reparations to Black farmers, historically discriminated against. They are still fighting for their rights. Here's John Boyd, one of those farmers, protesting in Washington. Take a look.
So we're going to be driving my trusty tractor here, Justice, all over Washington, so people can see what a real farmer looks like, a real Black farmer looks like, and the lives that they're affecting when they deny justice. We're so frustrated at the fact that this bill has failed in the Senate 7 times. Welcome to the White House. But I do think that Senator Obama was a far better advocate for Black farmers than President Obama has been today. I know that he's going to sign the bill into law. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to say that we need more of an urgent plea from the administration to get this done for Black farmers right now.
The bit that resonates for me is him saying Americans need to see what a real Black farmer looks like. It's like we need to see the real picture of so many things that are going on. Right. Why is this so important?
Well, and it's such an important frame, Laura, to contrast what's real with what's fiction. So what's real? There's actually a bill in front of Congress right now to actually fund a settlement that was based on an actual finding, real finding. This is real discrimination. This isn't in somebody's head, of long-term systematic discrimination against African American farmers. That's real, and that has no traction in DC right now. What's not real? The idea of the Black reverse racist, the idea of Shirley Sherrod, right? This is what generates so much conversation, and this is what many people now think racism looks like. Now, if this were just a problem on the Tea Party, then we'd say, okay, this is part of the politics that they have generated. But think about this. We have the director of the NAACP jumping on this bandwagon at 2 o'clock in the morning. Of all the things that you could tweet about, which might include, let's pass this bill now, right, to make good on the remedies that are due to the farmers. Instead, it's this specter of the Black reverse racist that we have to show that we're as opposed to them as someone else. And you have a White House that was elected based on the hopes and dreams of people to see racial justice done. And instead, they are basically calling the shots here. This is the post-racial juggernaut.
And this is why we need to maintain this post-racialism watch episode here on GRITtv. I hope you come back, Kim, very soon. We'll have more links, so we'll have some links to Kim's work at our website and more information there too, grittv.org.